The story begins with our protagonist named Kajino. He seemed like a weak and harmless child nobody would pay attention. His small body and innocent face made him look completely incapable of fighting. However, beneath that ordinary appearance was someone who had spent years mastering different martial arts to an unbelievable level. Ever since he was young, Kajino wanted to become a hero who could protect others. But unlike most dreamers, he clearly understood how cruel reality worked. No matter how skilled a person became, a bullet could still kill them instantly, and even the strongest warrior would be powerless against something like a nuclear explosion. Despite knowing all of that, Kajino never stopped training and continued pushing himself beyond his limits every day. One day, Kajini, the billionaire's daughter, and also Kajino's close companion, was suddenly taken by a group of kidnappers right before his eyes. Their plan was simple: hold her captive until her family paid a massive ransom. While waiting, the criminals continued treating her badly inside their hideout. Then, without warning, Kajino arrived. The atmosphere immediately changed the moment he stepped inside. One of the kidnappers quickly aimed his firearm at him, but before anyone could react, a bottle struck straight through the man's hand. A second later, Kajino rushed forward, slammed the criminal to the ground, and knocked him out effortlessly. Another kidnapper, who used to be a soldier, managed to wound Kajino in the shoulder. Even so, Kajino instantly disarmed him and shattered his arm. The criminal desperately tried reaching for a firearm, but Kajino cut through his leg, struck his head, and completely overwhelmed him without taking his life. Once the enemies were defeated, Kajino picked up the knife lying nearby and freed Kajina. She wanted to thank him, but he disappeared before she could even speak. Soon after, the police arrived and safely brought her back to her father. Meanwhile, Kajino blamed himself for not being strong enough and repeatedly smashed his head against a wall in frustration. Without noticing, he suddenly leaped in front of a moving truck and lost his life. But instead of ending there, his story was only beginning. After dying, he was reincarnated into another world overflowing with magical power, the exact kind of strength he had always dreamed about. In this new life, he was born into a noble family known for their incredible swordsmanship and overwhelming power. The family focused all their expectations on his talented older sister, Krillo, whose abilities far surpassed everyone else's. Compared to her brilliance, Kajino lived quietly in her shadow. One day, he secretly hunted down several bandits by himself. During the battle, someone suddenly attacked from behind and stabbed him in the chest, but the strike did absolutely nothing. Kajino easily defeated the attacker like all the others and reclaimed the stolen money. During those events, he encountered a strange, cursed girl. Curious about her condition, Kajino brought her back and spent an entire month experimenting until he successfully removed the curse. After regaining her normal appearance, the girl asked him what had happened to her. Kajino then explained that a secret organization known as the Cult of Diablos had cursed her along with all descendants of ancient heroes. According to him, the cult operated in the shadows while attempting to revive the strongest demon in existence. He introduced himself as Shadow and declared that their role was to hide in darkness and hunt evil from within it. Kajino also warned her that following him would lead to a dangerous life, so she was free to leave whenever she wanted. The girl refused to abandon him because without his help, she would have remained a monster forever. She swore loyalty to him for the rest of her life. In truth, Kajino had completely made up the story about the Cult of Diablos after randomly seeing the word Diablos written on a juice bottle, but the girl believed every word. She later proposed gathering other descendants of heroes to strengthen their group. Kajino named the organization Shadow Garden and gave her the codename Alpha as its very first member. 3 years passed, and Kajino eventually reached the age of 13 while continuing his daily training alongside Krillo. He constantly pretended to be weak in front of her, despite being far stronger than she realized. Krillo often mocked him, saying his skills never improved no matter how hard he practiced. Kajino later explained that noble children were required to enter the Magic Academy once they turned 15. And Krillo had finally reached that age. However, before she could leave for the academy, she was suddenly kidnapped. Over the previous years, Shadow Garden had continued growing by recruiting more members. Kajino asked Alpha if his sister was still alive, and she confirmed that she was. Alpha also revealed that the main suspects behind the kidnapping were connected to the Cult of Diablo. They believed Krillo might carry the bloodline of the legendary heroes who once defeated them, so they intended to eliminate anyone tied to that lineage. After learning the truth, Kajino immediately decided to leave home and ordered the 7 shadows to prepare for an attack that very night. At the same time, the enemy commander explained to Krillo that despite having her magic sealed, she could still move because true strength was determined not by the quantity of magic, but by the way it was controlled. She admitted she learned that lesson from her younger brother, even though he always appeared weaker than her. The commander still chose to keep her imprisoned as a precaution. Furious, Krillo shattered her restraints and warned them that she would never forgive anyone who harmed her brother. In response, the commander violently smashed her into the wall. At that exact moment, Shadow Garden launched their assault on the hideout. Every enemy standing in their way was completely crushed. Soon, the Seven Shadows confronted the commander and declared that all followers of the Cult of Diablos deserved death. Hearing those words, the commander immediately attacked Alpha with his sword, but the difference in power between them was overwhelming. Driven into desperation, the commander swallowed a mysterious pill that drastically boosted his abilities, yet even that failed to help him defeat Alpha. Eventually, he abandoned the fight and tried escaping, but Shadow Garden did not bother chasing him because another person was already waiting ahead. Shadow suddenly appeared before the fleeing commander. The man attacked without hesitation, but Shadow effortlessly blocked every strike. Although he acknowledged the commander's powerful magic, he criticized him for using it poorly before offering to personally teach him how true power worked. As the battle continued, Shadow demonstrated various techniques while warning the commander that if they ever met again, he should run immediately. Even while being completely overpowered, the commander continued insisting that Shadow could never stand against the darkness hidden within the world. Shadow calmly answered that he himself was the one who hid within the shadows to hunt that darkness. The commander consumed all of his remaining pills, causing his speed and strength to increase even further, but it still was not enough. Shadow finally declared that the commander remained far too weak. A terrifying explosion of magical energy burst from Shadow's body before he completely annihilated his enemy and walked away. The following day, Krillo safely returned home. Once she recovered, she departed for the academy as originally planned. Around sunset, the Seven Shadows informed Shadow that they would soon separate in order to expand Shadow Garden and continue fighting the Cult of Diablos on a much larger scale. After hearing this, Kajino secretly laughed to himself because the entire story about the cult had originally been nothing more than a random fantasy he invented, yet everyone around him continued treating it as reality. Eventually, Kajino also turned 15 and entered the academy. Despite his new surroundings, nothing about his true personality had changed because he still preferred living quietly within the shadows. Instead of staying in the academy dormitory, he rented a small apartment to maintain the image of a hidden mastermind lurking in darkness. To avoid standing out, Kajino intentionally befriended the two weakest students in the academy. The three of them eventually created a contest where whoever received the worst grades would have to confess to the academy's most beautiful girl. As expected, Kajino lost the challenge and approached the girl, secretly hoping she would reject him immediately. Nobody expected Alexia to actually agree to Kajino's confession, but to his surprise, she fully went along with the entire act. By the following morning, rumors about their relationship had already spread throughout the academy. Alexia later invited Kajino to eat with her, while Kajino secretly planned to find a way to end the fake relationship during their meal. Instead, Alexia brought up his recent sword training and revealed that she had already arranged for him to practice in the same training area she used herself. When Kajino arrived there with her, he met Xenon, a famous knight recognized as one of the strongest warriors in the kingdom. During practice, Kajino noticed that Alexia relied only on simple and basic sword techniques. Her style lacked anything flashy, yet it was still highly effective. The problem was that everyone constantly compared her to her talented older sister, causing people to underestimate her abilities. After the training session, Kajino discovered that Alexia was actually engaged to Xenon despite having no feelings for him at all. That was the true reason she accepted Kajino's confession in the first place. Kajino immediately complained because he wanted nothing to do with complicated royal issues or unnecessary attention. However, Alexia exposed the fake confession challenge he and his friends had secretly created and threatened to reveal it to the entire academy if he refused to cooperate. She even offered him money for continuing the act, and Kajino honestly admitted that he could never reject easy cash. Because of that deal, the two continued acting like a couple. Alexia stayed close to Kajino mainly to irritate Xenon, yet strangely, Xenon barely reacted at all. After 2 weeks passed without any change, Alexia finally grew tired of the situation. Before ending their fake romance, she mentioned that Kajino reminded her of herself. The way he fought, his basic swordsmanship, and even his preference for simple techniques were almost identical to her own style. Kujino then told her that he once heard those same words from her older sister after she lost badly during a swordsmanship competition. Alexia admitted she hated that style more than anything because it constantly reminded her of being seen as inferior. Kujino calmly answered that he personally admired that fighting style very much. Hearing that immediately angered Alexia. She pointed her blade toward him and demanded to know why he felt that way. Kujino simply explained that he hated seeing people reject something he genuinely appreciated. That argument became the final moment of their fake relationship. The next morning, while Kujino was on his way to the academy, Zenon suddenly stopped him alongside several guards. Alexia had disappeared the previous night, and since Kujino was the last person seen with her, suspicion immediately fell on him. Kujino allowed himself to be arrested without resisting. At the same time, Alexia was being held captive with anti-magic chains restraining her body. Nearby stood a strange creature while a crazed scientist excitedly talked about finally obtaining royal blood. He extracted Alexia's blood and revealed that it contained the demonic essence required to revive Diablo. At that moment, Kujino's made-up fantasy unexpectedly turned into reality because the cult of Diablos truly existed after all. Meanwhile, Kujino was being brutally interrogated by soldiers demanding information about Alexia's whereabouts. Despite repeated torture, he continued claiming ignorance while joking around as if the pain meant nothing. Back inside the laboratory, the scientist continued draining large amounts of blood from Alexia. He explained that years earlier, his research was nearly complete until mysterious individuals suddenly destroyed everything. Determined not to fail again, he kept experimenting on Alexia by forcing unknown substance into her body. 5 days later, the investigation still failed to uncover Alexia's location. Since the soldiers gained nothing useful from Kujino and believed someone as weak as him could never overpower Alexia, they eventually decided to release him. Elsewhere, Iris informed Zenon that she intended to personally search for her missing sister. At the academy, Krilo desperately tried leaving campus to rescue Kujino herself, but the other students stopped her before she could go. By sunset, Kujino finally walked free. On his way home, he noticed 2 suspicious men secretly following him, though he pretended not to care. Once he returned home, he found Alpha waiting there. She explained that she rushed over as soon as she learned about his situation and had already discovered the truth behind Alexia's kidnapping. According to Alpha, the people responsible were members of the cult of Diablos targeting Alexia because of her royal bloodline. After changing into the Shadow Garden uniform, Alpha announced that the time to act had finally arrived. Kujino casually mentioned the soldiers who tortured him and suggested sparing them for the moment. Alpha then began explaining the mission strategy, but Kujino interrupted and declared that he would personally lead the operation because the entire world needed to learn about Shadow Garden that very night. Once their discussion ended, the 2 spies following Kujino mocked him by throwing Alexia's shoe toward him and accusing him of being the kidnapper. Without hesitation, Kujino instantly killed both men. Soon after, Shadow Garden launched a massive assault across the kingdom, wiping out corrupt individuals everywhere they appeared. Meanwhile, Iris ordered Zenon to remain behind and protect the academy students while she joined the battle herself. Elsewhere, Alexia remained trapped as the scientist panicked in fear, terrified that the same mysterious group from years ago would destroy his experiment again. Using Alexia's blood, he injected power into the strange creature, causing it to evolve into an uncontrollable monster. The creature immediately killed the scientist before freeing Alexia and escaping into the city. Alexia grabbed a sword and attempted to flee, but Zenon suddenly blocked her path. It was finally revealed that he had orchestrated everything from the beginning. Zenon explained that Alexia's blood was necessary for him to maintain his position among the elite knights of the rounds. He admitted her older sister would have been a better choice, but Alexia was still sufficient for his goals. Filled with rage, Alexia attacked him with all her strength. Zenon mocked her insecurities and reminded her how people constantly compared her to her talented sister, while treating her like a disappointment. Furious, Alexia unleashed her full power and declared she would prove exactly what that failure could accomplish. She successfully landed a strike and wounded Zenon, but he calmly warned her that she had just sealed her own fate. Moments later, he disarmed her and violently slammed her to the ground. As Zenon walked away afterward, he suddenly encountered Shadow waiting in front of him. Surprised, Zenon demanded to know where he came from. Shadow coldly answered that he had arrived to eliminate him. Zenon quickly realized that Shadow was the mysterious figure repeatedly interfering with the cult's operation. Shadow then introduced himself as the one who hunted evil from within the darkness. Zenon arrogantly claimed that defeating weaker cult members meant nothing because Shadow only targeted easy opponents. Shadow calmly replied that whether his enemies were weak or powerful, the outcome would never change. Furious, Zenon declared that Shadow was blinded by arrogance and would soon die at the hands of one of the kingdom's strongest knights. Zenon charged forward at full speed, but Shadow effortlessly avoided every attack while sarcastically asking where this great knight Zenon kept talking about actually was. Meanwhile, the monster rampaged through the city, destroying everything around it. The kingdom's knights desperately fought back, but failed to stop it. Eventually, Iris arrived and unleashed a devastating strike that badly wounded the creature. However, the monster instantly regenerated, shocking everyone watching. Refusing to back down, Iris gathered her strength once more and charged forward again, severing one of the creature's arms before continuing the battle. Iris repeatedly smashed the monster into the walls around them, but no matter how badly it was damaged, the creature kept regenerating over and over again. Realizing normal attacks were useless, Iris concluded that the only way to defeat it was to continue cutting it apart faster than it could heal. She pushed herself to the limit and kept attacking non-stop. But before she could finish the monster, Alpha suddenly stepped in and coldly informed her that all her efforts were pointless. The creature instantly rushed toward Alpha, yet she disappeared before it could touch her. In the next instant, she reappeared high above the monster and unleashed a single overwhelming strike that completely erased it without leaving anything behind. Iris witnessed the entire scene with disbelief written across her face. Once the smoke cleared, she demanded to know who Alpha truly was. Alpha calmly replied that her identity was irrelevant, but if Iris absolutely needed an answer, then she should remember the name Shadow Garden, an organization that moved within the shadows. Right after saying those words, Alpha vanished without a trace. Elsewhere, Shadow's battle against Zenon continued intensifying. Zenon admitted that he had underestimated Shadow's abilities, but he still refused to believe Shadow could ever surpass him. He released a massive surge of magical energy from his body, yet none of it affected Shadow in the slightest. Shadow casually walked straight past him as though Zenon was insignificant, knocked him down effortlessly, and pressed a blade against his neck. Even then, Zenon refused to surrender and continued attacking wildly. Shadow countered every strike with ease. Watching the fight, Alexia suddenly realized that Shadow's swordsmanship was identical to the same simple style she always used herself. For years, she believed that style was weak and embarrassing, but now she finally understood the truth. The problem had never been the sword style itself. The real issue was her own lack of strength. Even if she could never rival the natural talent of her older sister, she promised herself that she would continue following the ordinary path she believed in. At that same moment, Shadow drove his sword straight through Zenon's chest. Confused, Zenon questioned why someone possessing such monstrous power would continue hiding in the shadows instead of revealing himself to the world. Shadow answered calmly, explaining that Shadow Garden existed only to hunt down criminals like him. Refusing to accept defeat, Zenon declared he would finally show his true strength. He pulled out several pills and explained that even a single one could greatly amplify a person's power. After swallowing the drug, his magical energy exploded dramatically. Zenon proudly claimed that ordinary people would die instantly from such a substance, but he was one of the rare individuals capable of surviving it. Overflowing with confidence, he charged at Shadow once more to prove his newfound power, but Shadow blocked the attack without even taking a step back. He casually disarmed Zenon, struck him multiple times, and slammed him violently onto the ground. Shadow then unleashed his full magical power and declared that the fight was over. The overwhelming energy pouring from his body terrified Zenon because no human should have possessed that level of strength. Shadow explained that in his previous life, he was powerless before nuclear weapons. So in this world, he decided to become something even greater than a nuclear weapon. Zenon dismissed those words as insanity and launched another desperate attack only for his sword to shatter instantly upon impact. Shadow then proclaimed himself the strongest existent and released a catastrophic attack powerful enough to wipe out the entire surrounding area. The destruction was so massive that nobody present had ever seen anything comparable to it before. The seven shadows watched the scene with admiration and excitement, while Iris stood completely speechless after witnessing such terrifying power being unleashed in the middle of the capital. After the battle ended, Alexia crawled out from beneath the destroyed rubble and admitted that she needed to grow stronger because remaining weak was no longer an option for her. Soon after, Iris finally found her sister and immediately embraced her in relief. The next day, Alexia met Kajino once again and explained that despite everything that happened the night before, the outcome had actually benefited her because she was finally free from Zenon. Kajino casually congratulated her and attempted to leave, but Alexia suddenly stopped him. Blushing heavily, she shyly asked if they could continue pretending to date. Kajino rejected the idea immediately. On that same day, investigators discovered blood splattered across a wall inside the academy, but no corpse was ever found. Since there was no evidence proving anyone had died, the authorities eventually closed the case entirely. Not long afterward, attention shifted toward a group of noble girls who constantly talked about Shadow with admiration. At the same time, rumors regarding Shadow Garden began spreading throughout the kingdom. Unfortunately, many people believed the organization was simply murdering innocent civilians without reason. Meanwhile, Iris continued investigating both the Cult of Diablos and Shadow Garden. She realized there was clearly corruption hidden within the Royal Knights, especially after learning about Xenon's betrayal. Because of that, she decided to create a completely new investigation unit and personally handpick every member herself. Elsewhere, a mysterious magical artifact connected to Kajino was discovered, but nobody could understand how it worked. Eventually, the artifact was brought to Sherry, a girl recognized as the greatest specialist in magical research. At first, she refused to get involved, but after receiving promises of protection from the Cult of Diablos, she finally agreed to cooperate. Alexia later told Iris that she also wanted to participate in the investigation because she wished to uncover the truth about both Shadow Garden and the Cult of Diablo. Iris accepted her request but warned her not to overwork herself. Later that evening, a frightened man begged a mysterious assassin for mercy in the middle of the streets, but the killer showed none at all. While repeatedly declaring the arrival of Shadow Garden, the assassin mercilessly killed him on the spot. The following day, Kajino's friends excitedly informed him about a brand new product called chocolate that everyone suddenly wanted to buy. Curious about the craze, Kajino accompanied them to the store. Upon arriving, he immediately noticed that the architecture looked strangely similar to the modern world from his previous life. This caused him to wonder whether another person from Earth might have somehow appeared in this world too. While lost in those thoughts, a girl approached him and politely asked him to participate in a small survey regarding their products. Kajino agreed and followed her deeper into the building. Once inside, he realized the giant shopping center looked almost identical to malls from modern Earth. Before he could fully process the situation, he asked where the new product actually was. Instead of answering directly, the girl guided him into another room. The moment the doors opened, everyone inside greeted him respectfully. Kajino was stunned after learning that the massive shopping mall was owned by one of the Seven Shadows. Shadow questioned whether she seriously expected him to believe such a gigantic business empire belonged to her alone. She proudly confirmed it and explained that everything she built was possible because of the knowledge and advice he casually shared with her long ago. The advice he mentioned from the past was actually nonsense he made up on the spot just to get rid of her, but she kept believing every word anyway. Kajino admitted to himself that she had been a genius since childhood, and was probably the smartest among the Seven Shadows, although she acted clumsy sometimes. While walking, she suddenly tripped and fell on her face before respectfully offering him a seat and calling him her master. Kajino sat down and felt as if he had finally achieved his dream of becoming a true mastermind hiding in the shadows. As a reward for everything they had done, he shared some of his power with them. As usual, everyone continued endlessly praising him. Kajino then asked whether the shopping mall was making huge profit, and she proudly confirmed it. They already had several branches across the city and even delivered products to other countries. However, she hesitated while revealing the amount of money they had earned. Their total wealth had already reached 1 billion gold coins. Hearing that number completely shocked Shadow from the inside. He could not believe they managed to collect such an enormous fortune in such a short time. She then explained that she already knew he came there because of the serial killer pretending to be Shadow Garden, but assured him they would capture the criminal soon. Kajino casually replied that he already had an idea about the killer's identity, although he was actually referring to Alexia in his thoughts. He decided to personally handle the investigation himself. Before he left, Gamma introduced him to a new member of Shadow Garden named Nu, and told him to contact her whenever he needed assistance. Kajino then requested 3 pieces of chocolate and she happily agreed to give them to him for free. While laughing together, Kajino secretly stole a few gold coins without her noticing. After getting what he wanted, Kajino returned to his friends. They hurried back toward the dormitory because the kingdom had recently tightened security after all the chaos that happened. While walking, Kajino suddenly heard the sound of clashing swords. He immediately told his friends to return to the dorms without him while pretending he needed to use the bathroom. His acting skills were so convincing that he deserved an award. The sword fight turned out to be Alexia battling someone claiming to belong to Shadow Garden. She easily defeated him and declared that he was obviously an imposter. At that exact moment, 3 more enemies appeared behind her. Alexia managed to defend herself at first, but eventually the numbers became too overwhelming. One of the attackers was about to kill her when Kajino suddenly appeared and killed the enemy instantly. Kajino then warned the fake Shadow Garden members that their day had come. The moment they saw him, they immediately ran away in fear. Kajino was about to chase them, but Alexia stopped him and asked what his true goal was. Kajino coldly replied that it was none of her business before continuing after the enemy. He quickly killed one of them and was about to finish the second, but Nu suddenly intervened and asked him to leave the survivor to her so she could extract information. Kajino agreed and stepped aside. The foolish enemy immediately attacked Nu, but she sliced him cleanly in half without killing him somehow. At the same time, 2 members of the Cult of Diablos asked their leader what they should do next. Their leader explained that they needed to recover the magical artifact currently in Sherry's possession. Later, Alexia sat together with Iris and explained that the people murdering innocent citizens were not actually Shadow Garden. She revealed that she personally fought one of them earlier and would have died if Shadow had not appeared and saved her. Because of that, she no longer believed Shadow was evil. Hearing this reminded Iris of Alpha's terrifying strength. However, Iris still declared that both the Cult of Diablos and Shadow Garden were enemies, and she refused to allow either group to remain inside the kingdom. The following morning, Shadow gave the chocolate he bought to Sherry, making her incredibly happy. While she enjoyed it, her adoptive father walked in and jokingly asked whether someone had fallen in love with her. It was then revealed that Sherry was not actually his biological daughter. He adopted her after her mother was killed by the Cult of Diablo. Fortunately, Sherry inherited her mother's incredible genius for research. Meanwhile, Nu reported to Shadow that the man they captured the previous day had died before revealing any information. The reason was because a spell had been placed on his brain that killed him if he exposed secrets about the cult. Nu explained that the Cult of Diablos raised orphan children to use magic, brainwashed them into becoming living killing machines, and even experimented on them by injecting them with the cells of the demon Diablo. Thankfully, they managed to identify one of the cult's warriors named Rex, who was impersonating Shadow Garden in order to provoke them. Kajino accepted the report casually because he was already planning to participate in the Bushin Festival tournament, where the world's strongest fighters and knights competed. After some time, he joined the preliminary matches. In the very first battle, Shadow won instantly. The next match was between Shadow and Rose, the student council president, and one of the academy's strongest swordswomen. The fight began with both rushing toward each other. As usual, Kajino pretended to be weak as much as possible. Every time he fell, he forced himself back up again. Eventually, the referee stopped the match and sent him to the hospital for treatment, which was exactly what Kajino wanted because it perfectly fit his background character act. While returning to the dormitory later, Sherry stopped him and offered him homemade cookies because she had completely fallen in love with him. Kajino honestly did not even remember her name at first, but the moment he noticed she was standing beside the vice principal of the Academy's science department, he became shocked. He had unknowingly gotten close to one of the Academy's most famous students. Sherry's adoptive father then asked Kajino to take good care of his daughter. Kajino internally complained about how the story kept forcing him into important situations even though he only wanted to remain a side character instead of becoming the main hero. However, he comforted himself by remembering that his injuries would keep him locked inside his room for 4 days. Meanwhile, Sherry continued researching the magical artifact while constantly thinking about Kajino. It became obvious she had fallen deeply in love with him. Suddenly, her mood worsened after remembering seeing Kajino together with Alexia at the academy. Since she could not stop thinking about it, she visited Alexia directly to ask whether she loved Kajino or not. Alexia casually replied that she did not even remember anyone named Kajino. Hearing that answer made Sherry extremely happy because all her worries disappeared instantly. She admitted that she had been so distracted by thoughts of Kajino that she could barely focus on decoding the artifact. Excited and relieved, she skipped away happily. Meanwhile, Alexia secretly became furious because she clearly had feelings for Kajino too, even though she refused to admit it. Elsewhere, members of the Cult of Diablos quietly gathered inside a classroom. One of them suddenly sensed something strange happen. The Cult of Diablos had launched a full assault on the academy. A magical barrier surrounded the entire school, preventing anyone from entering or leaving while security guards were eliminated one after another. Kajino attempted to use magic but discovered that the barrier disrupted magical abilities. At that moment, Cult members invaded the classroom. Rose reacted immediately by drawing her sword and preparing to fight. But one of the enemies completely overpowered her. Just as the attacker was about to finish her off, Kajino suddenly jumped in front of her at the last second, taking the attack himself, before collapsing onto the ground like a lifeless corpse. Rose broke down crying after seeing him sacrifice himself to protect her. Kajino did not even remember Rose's name properly, but while the cult members gathered all the students into one large hall, Kajino suddenly raised his hand and repeatedly struck his chest until he finally woke back up. He proudly declared that he had successfully created a new technique called temporary death, which allowed him to remain dead for 10 minutes. He explained that he controlled the flow of blood with magic, so the brain would continue receiving oxygen even if his heart stopped beating. Thanks to that, he stayed alive despite technically being dead. Kajino admitted that if he had made even the smallest mistake, he would have actually died, but he believed the risk was worth it. Although the barrier still interfered with magic, he discovered that turning his magic into threads allowed him to use it normally. Using those threads, he stitched his wound back together and prepared to deal with the cult member. Meanwhile, Sherry was finally close to decoding the magical artifact when Rex suddenly appeared. Pretending to be one of Shadow Garden's agents, he demanded that Sherry hand over the artifact immediately if she wanted to survive. Sherry refused, so Rex attacked her. At the last second, the guards intervened and allowed Sherry to escape, although it appeared the vice principal died during the attack. At that same time, Shadow stood on the rooftop of the academy while observing everything happening below. He realized that all the students had been imprisoned inside the main hall, and anyone who tried resisting or escaping would immediately be killed by the snipers surrounding the academy. The academy's entire security force had already been eliminated. Fortunately, the Royal Knights had arrived to help, but the magical barrier prevented them from entering. However, that situation was exactly what Shadow wanted because it gave him the perfect stage to play with the enemies until nightfall. The slaughter immediately began. One enemy died after another in rapid succession. Meanwhile, Rex was getting closer and closer to Sherry when Shadow suddenly shot him directly in the head, instantly killing him. Shadow calmly commented that everything was proceeding exactly according to the script, and declared that at the perfect moment, he would emerge dramatically from the shadows. Shadow then jumped down from the building in an incredibly stylish manner. Another enemy appeared behind Sherry, but Shadow killed him instantly. The situation continued repeating itself. Every time an enemy reached Sherry, Shadow eliminated them immediately. During the chaos, Sherry explained that the artifact the cult wanted was called the Eye of Avarice. She revealed that the cult used it to interfere with magic while also allowing it to absorb magical energy within a certain area and store it temporarily for later use. Kajino then asked why the cult members dressed in black could still use magic without problems. Sherry explained that the artifact was programmed to absorb only specific types of magic. Kajino asked whether that meant the artifact did not absorb every type of magic equally. Sherry admitted that the answer was not mentioned in the artifact's record. She further explained that destroying the Eye of Avarice would require an absurd amount of magical energy, something she considered completely impossible because no normal person possessed such overwhelming power. Kajino agreed with her and realized that because all the students had been gathered inside the main hall, the Eye of Avarice must also be there. If the artifact continued absorbing magic until reaching its limit, it would eventually cause a catastrophic explosion capable of completely destroying the academy. Sherry then revealed that the only way to stop everything was another magical artifact she had already decoded. Once the Eye of Avarice was placed at the center of the decoding device, the entire system would shut down. The problem, however, was that all the decoding equipment remained inside the main hall. In order to reach it safely, they needed to travel through the underground levels because all entrances and exits inside the academy were connected. Kajino immediately volunteered to retrieve the necessary equipment himself, while Sherry promised she could handle the rest. At that same moment, one of the cult leaders angrily demanded to know where the magical artifact was. His subordinate explained that the girl still possessed it and they could retrieve it any time. The leader furiously warned him not to make any mistakes or he would personally kill him. Before leaving, the subordinate reported that a mysterious fighter hidden inside the academy had already slaughtered countless cult members and was likely connected to Shadow Garden. The leader arrogantly dismissed the warning and ordered everyone to move out immediately. The leader and 4 cult members advanced together, but within seconds, 2 of them suddenly disappeared. When the leader turned around, the remaining men beside him had vanished as well. Before he could react properly, a bright flashlight blinded him. He quickly regained his balance and activated his power while shouting arrogantly, but he realized too late that he had been talking to himself the entire time, because Shadow was already standing behind him. Shadow immediately smashed him into the wall with overwhelming force. Terrified, the cult member entered a classroom while trembling in fear. Despite the magical barrier sealing everyone's powers, Shadow's incredible speed and strength completely overwhelmed them. The frightened man looked around and realized every single cult member nearby had already been killed. Before he could even process what happened, Shadow appeared in front of him and eliminated him instantly as well. Afterward, Shadow met with Nu, who informed him that Shadow Garden had already infiltrated the academy and stood ready to follow his orders. However, there was one major problem. Since the magical barrier interfered with magic, the ordinary members could not fight properly. Because of that, they needed the 7 shadows to handle the situation. Unfortunately, none of the 7 shadows were present except Gamma, whose combat abilities were extremely poor. Ignoring the danger, Kajino focused on gathering the tools Sherry requested. His plan was to disable the artifact so everyone could use magic normally again. Once he returned to Sherry, she instantly decoded the device completely. Together, they headed toward the underground levels. While descending the stairs, Sherry remembered watching her mother die at the hands of criminals right before her eyes. Since then, the vice principal, who had been her mother's close friend, raised her like his own daughter. Meanwhile, the cult leader wondered why Rex had still not returned. He briefly suspected Rex might have failed, but quickly dismissed the idea. At that same moment, the students trapped inside the hall panicked and begged Rose to let them escape before they all died. Rose calmly explained that moving recklessly would only get them killed. Even if they somehow defeated the sniper, they still had no chance against the cult leader, whose power was overwhelming. Right after Rose finished speaking, one of the students was instantly killed by a sniper headshot. At the same time, Sherry successfully sneaked into the main hall and activated the device she carried. The moment she did, the magical barrier collapsed completely. Rose immediately reacted, defeating one enemy in an instant before shouting that everyone's magic had finally returned. Encouraged by her words, all the students began launching their counterattack. The cult members and the students immediately began fighting each other. 4 cult members surrounded Rose and were about to kill her, but there was no way that would happen while Shadow was present. Shadow suddenly appeared, and this time he was not alone because Shadow Garden arrived together with him. They declared that Shadow Garden lurked within the shadows to hunt darkness itself. As expected, every enemy they encountered was completely destroyed. The cult leader saw what was happening and realized he needed to act personally. Before leaving the main hall, he set the entire place on fire. Now that the barrier surrounding the academy had disappeared, Iris and the royal soldiers finally entered the school. They discovered the bodies of the academy guards everywhere, but fortunately the students were still alive, all thanks to Shadow Garden. Iris considered interfering, but she understood that Shadow Garden would handle the situation far more effectively than she ever could. Meanwhile, the vice principal went to Sherry's room and burned all the books inside. At that moment, he suddenly heard a voice mocking the clothes he was wearing and claiming they did not suit him at all. Shocked, the vice principal realized his identity had been exposed. Shadow then asked him why someone who supposedly cared nothing about status and power would commit such terrible acts. The vice principal explained that he used to be the strongest man during his youth, but he was eventually struck by a deadly illness. He searched desperately for a cure but found nothing. That was when he turned toward magical artifact. By coincidence, he met Sherry's genius mother, and she became his greatest opportunity. Over time, they discovered the Eye of Avarice, an artifact capable of granting immense power to its owner. However, Sherry's mother wanted to hand it over to the kingdom. Because of that, the vice principal claimed he had no choice but to kill her. Hearing that horrifying confession enraged Shadow completely. Shadow realized that the only reason the vice principal kept Sherry close was to exploit her intelligence. The battle between them immediately began. The vice principal managed to wound Shadow in the chest, causing both of them to crash out of the building. He attempted to escape, but Kajino instantly appeared before him in the form of Shadow. The vice principal finally understood that the person standing before him was Shadow Garden's leader himself. Realizing the danger, he decided not to underestimate Shadow anymore. and activated the Eye of Avarice. An enormous amount of magical energy burst out from his body as he attacked Shadow with rapid and powerful strikes. However, none of it worked. Shadow effortlessly blocked every attack and countered with even greater force, leaving the Vice Principal injured instead. Furious, the Vice Principal unleashed more power and attacked again, while declaring that no matter how strong Shadow was, everything would end once his identity became exposed before the Academy. He believed that after revealing Shadow's existence, not only the kingdom but the entire world would reject him out of fear. Shadow simply laughed and explained that Shadow Garden had never been created to follow justice or evil. Their organization existed only to do whatever they desired. Even if the entire world turned against them, nothing about them would ever change. Despite everything, the old man continued attacking recklessly. Shadow stabbed his hand, then his leg, then his shoulder, and finally pierced his heart. After that, Shadow destroyed the Eye of Avarice completely, killing the Vice Principal in front of Sherry's eyes. However, Shadow refused to reveal the truth to Sherry. Instead, he silently walked away. The next day, the kingdom officially accused Shadow Garden of murdering the Vice Principal. Ironically, Shadow Garden's members were actually happy because Shadow's name would now spread across other nations as well. Alpha then admitted that she once believed Shadow Garden existed to bring justice to the world, but now understood that the organization existed only to fulfill Shadow's wishes. Soon after, the Academy gave the students a break while repairs were being made. Sherry informed Kajino that she would leave the kingdom to continue studying abroad. Kajino dramatically pretended to beg her not to leave, because he supposedly could not live without her, but Sherry silently walked away anyway. Sometime later, after the situation finally became peaceful again, Alpha sent Shadow a message informing him that they had discovered the enemy's hideout inside the Holy Land, which would become their next destination. Meanwhile, the 7 Shadows spent their free time doing whatever they enjoyed most. Epsilon and Beta constantly competed with each other to win Shadow's affection, even though Shadow could barely remember their names. Nu then arrived and informed them that Alpha had sent a message. Elsewhere, Alexia and Iris visited Gamma's shopping mall to buy supplies. During their conversation, it was revealed that they were also heading toward the Holy Land, making it obvious that chaos would soon erupt there as well. Gamma cleverly manipulated the conversation while offering them chocolate and quickly figured out that they were traveling to the Holy Land. Since they were leaving for a long trip, the two sisters ended up buying a huge amount of unnecessary items. Back at the Academy, which was still heavily damaged, Kajino visited the infirmary and pretended to be seriously injured and unable to move. Rose visited him there and confessed that he had given her a new life, causing her to fall deeply in love with him. She stayed attached to him constantly like melted cheese on pizza. Her feelings became so strong that she even joined him on the journey to the Holy Land, specifically to a place called Lindworm. According to the narrator, Lindworm was the location where the gods granted the heroes their powers so they could defeat the Demon King. Every year, a tournament called the Olivia Festival was held there in honor of Olivia, the hero who defeated the demon Diablo. During the festival, the sacred gate would open, allowing competitors the chance to summon ancient warriors from the past. Many contestants participated in the event every year, but most of them left completely defeated. Despite that harsh reality, people still continued joining annually. It almost felt like the story simply wanted to show how muscular Kajino had become. Kajino eventually realized that Rose had no intention of leaving him alone, so he planned to escape during the night. Unfortunately, Rose completely ruined his plan because she refused to let go of his arm. She happily declared that they belonged to each other now and should start thinking about their future together. Kajino desperately begged for some personal space. When night finally came, Kajino climbed onto the roof of the train to avoid being seen by Rose. Eventually, they arrived at their destination. There, Kajino noticed medals shaped like arms. Rose explained that the demon Diablos had been defeated in that location, and the medals were basically souvenirs celebrating the victory. Rumors even claimed that the government still secretly possessed Diablo's remains. While traveling through the city, Kajino encountered the most famous new author of the generation, who turned out to be Beta. Shadow became shocked after realizing that the 7 Shadows were somehow capable of turning everything they touched successful business. Before Kajino could even properly speak with her, Beta immediately handed him all the details regarding their next mission. Meanwhile, Alpha arrived at the Royal Sanctuary and encountered someone named Drake. Alpha arrived at the Royal Sanctuary and encountered Drake, the Bishop of the Sacred Land. She questioned what Olivia had been hiding and demanded to know the full truth about what truly happened between the hero Olivia and the demon Diablos before leaving the area. Meanwhile, Shadow was relaxing in the city while saying that the real game was finally about to begin. Since he had free time, he casually started fighting one of the Cult of Diablos members and ended up killing him with nothing more than an ice cream stick. Right after that, Epsilon appeared and informed him that the cult's executioner had already been eliminated, but they failed to locate the body because it vanished completely. Because of that, Shadow Garden would now move on to the next of the plan. Shadow asked Epsilon if she understood what she needed to do, and she confidently replied that they were fully prepared. At that moment, Shadow remembered the first time he met her when she was close to death, just like the other 7 shadows he saved in the past. Since that day, Epsilon had fallen deeply in love with him. Eventually, the day of the tournament arrived. The bald announcer explained that every contestant would demonstrate their strength, and if they were lucky enough, they might successfully summon one of the ancient heroes. Alexia stared suspiciously at the bald priest because he personally allowed her to continue investigating Drake, the head priest of the sanctuary. His excuse was that there was no more time left because the event was about to begin. The moment Alexia looked beside her, she noticed Beta. Everyone immediately began admiring Beta's beauty, making Alexia secretly jealous. She intentionally stepped on Beta's foot while pretending it was an accident. Beta calmly denied it being an accident and immediately began provoking Alexia in return. At that exact moment, the bald priest pressed a button and officially began the ceremony. A tremendous amount of magical energy erupted from the arena and surrounded the battlefield. The first contestant proudly showed off his abilities, but no one paid attention. The second, third, and fourth competitors also failed to impress anyone. Then the final contestant appeared, and it turned out to be Kajino himself. Kajino nearly lost his mind from shock, because he never intended to participate. It was later revealed that Rose secretly registered him for the tournament. Realizing his situation, Kajino thought he only had 3 choices. The first option was to participate normally, but that would almost certainly summon one of the ancient warriors and expose his true abilities. The second option was to run away, but that would get him expelled from the academy. Because of that, he chose the third option, appearing as Shadow instead. Shadow immediately appeared before everyone and declared himself the one who lurked within the shadows to hunt darkness. The bald priest calmly revealed that he had been waiting specifically for Shadow before summoning the cult's executioner. It became obvious that the priest had no intention of allowing Shadow to survive the day. At that moment, Shadow demonstrated his overwhelming power and summoned the strongest ancient warrior of all, the Witch of Calamity. It was the first time in history that anyone had successfully summoned her because she once destroyed the entire world. The mere fact that she responded to Shadow proved how terrifying his strength truly was. Beta confirmed the information with Jack and realized that the Witch of Calamity was nothing more than a legendary myth. Everyone immediately understood that Shadow was now in terrible danger because either the witch would kill him or force him into servitude forever. However, the witch calmly explained that neither outcome would happen. She only responded because she recognized Shadow as a worthy opponent. In other words, Shadow possessed enough power to potentially destroy even her. Meanwhile, Shadow became excited because she appeared just as eager for battle as he was. The Witch of Calamity attacked him from every direction using overwhelming magic, but Shadow effortlessly dodged every attack. Anyone watching believed Shadow was losing because he only avoided her attacks instead of counterattacking. But in reality, he was merely playing with her because he enjoyed talking to her and did not want to fight seriously. Unfortunately, something eventually ruined his mood. The very next second, Shadow instantly killed her. Before disappearing, he admitted that he truly wished he could have fought her at her full strength. The moment she died, the barrier surrounding the area shattered. A cursed wave of magical energy burst outward, and a massive magical gate appeared surrounding the entire kingdom. Alpha and the 7 shadows arrived immediately and praised Shadow's greatness. Meanwhile, Shadow proudly imagined how everyone would now worship him after hearing he defeated the Witch of Calamity. However, the exact same witch suddenly reappeared in front of him again. Shadow immediately tried escaping, but she continued following him relentlessly. Realizing she had no intention of leaving him alone, Shadow eventually entered the magical gate himself. Meanwhile, the bald priest was completely shocked that the Witch of Calamity actually responded to Shadow. Alexia demanded an explanation, but the priest explained that the opening night of the tournament had become a disaster. Magical gates normally existed in separate forms, such as sealed gates, challenge gates, and welcoming gates. The fact that all of them opened simultaneously meant a catastrophe was about to occur. The priest immediately ordered the guards to evacuate all the civilians. While everyone was moving, Alpha and the 7 shadows suddenly appeared. Alpha ordered Epsilon not to let the priest interfere while the rest of Shadow Garden entered the gate. At that same moment, a cult executioner appeared and threatened to kill Tatsumi if anyone moved. He was actually referring to Beta. Beta tearfully begged everyone not to interfere while pretending to be helpless. The executioner believed he successfully caught her off guard, but in the blink of an eye, Beta appeared behind him and sliced him into pieces. Afterward, Beta asked Jack whether he saw anything. Terrified, he immediately claimed he saw nothing at all. Beta then grabbed him by the head and jumped directly into the gate. Alexia refused to let the situation continue without her involvement, so she entered the gate together with Rose. Alpha questioned why they followed them, but Alexia casually claimed she accidentally walked into the gate. After tripping, Alpha then revealed an important truth. She explained that Shadow Garden knew the sacred land possessed the left arm of the demon Diablo. However, they were not there simply because of the arm. Their true goal was to completely destroy the cult of Diablos once and for all. Alpha then stopped in front of a statue and revealed that it represented the hero Olivia. Shocked, everyone pointed out that the legendary hero was supposed to be male. Alpha explained that someone had intentionally hidden the truth from history. She then revealed her own face, which looked almost identical to Olivia herself. Jack immediately realized that Alpha was the same cursed girl from before, and could not believe she was still alive. Alpha calmly explained that they came there to uncover the full truth about the cult of Diablo. She then opened the gate before them and summoned Olivia herself, declaring that their real journey was finally beginning. Meanwhile, Shadow continued speaking with the Witch of Calamity he summoned earlier. He admitted that he truly enjoyed fighting her, but the witch explained that her memories were incomplete and distorted. Even so, since she had been summoned by him, she acknowledged him as her chosen opponent. Shadow admitted that the Witch of Calamity was incredibly powerful, and that he truly enjoyed fighting her. Curious, she asked how he even managed to enter that strange world. Shadow honestly replied that he had no idea. He simply found a mysterious gate that kept pulling him in until he suddenly appeared in front of her. She wondered whether he was responsible for it too, but Shadow denied knowing anything about it. The witch then decided to search for a way back to the real world. Shadow immediately asked her not to abandon him because he also wanted to escape. Eventually, she freed him and explained that she had been trapped there for 1,000 years. The world they were imprisoned inside had been created from the ancient battles of the past. Because of that, escaping was extremely difficult. Every time they used magic, the space itself absorbed it, so they needed another method to leave. Meanwhile, Alpha and the others entered Olivia's memory. Inside those memories, they discovered laboratories where orphan children were experimented on by implanting them with the cells of the demon Diablo. Most of the children's bodies rejected the cells and died, while Olivia became one of the few successful experiments. The researchers claimed they had no choice because they needed stronger soldiers for the war. Since Olivia's body successfully adapted to the demon cells, they assigned her the mission of defeating Diablo. However, Alpha exposed the truth. Olivia had actually been ordered to gather additional cells from Diablos so the cult could continue their evil experiment. After Olivia successfully defeated the demon, the cult immediately imprisoned her and began producing special pills using the demon's cells. Unfortunately, the power those pills provided still did not satisfy them, so they continued their research until they created the final result, the Diablo's pills. A single pill was enough to grant overwhelming strength. Alpha explained that the pills had two major flaws. First, the user needed to continuously consume them or the effects would disappear completely. Second, the cult could only produce 12 pills per year. The only people allowed to use those pills were the cult's highest-ranking warriors known as the Knights of Rounds, whose total number was exactly 12. Alpha then exposed one of the cult members standing before them as number 11 of the Knights of Rounds. The man proudly admitted it and declared that he sought eternal immortality. Just as he was about to continue speaking, Delta suddenly killed him and threw his body into the sea. However, Alpha immediately scolded Delta for failing to confirm whether the enemy was truly dead. Sure enough, the man survived. He emerged from the sea, transported everyone to another location, and created countless clones of himself. He swore they would regret the day they decided to oppose the cult. Delta only smiled excitedly and challenged him directly. Since he refused to approach her, Delta charged toward him instead and slaughtered huge numbers of his clones. Unfortunately, it made no difference because the clones regenerated instantly. When the enemy suddenly appeared behind her, Delta blocked the attack and jumped away. At that moment, She realized her magic was being disrupted, while the enemy's powers were becoming stronger because they were now close to the sanctuary, the source of his power. The number of clones increased endlessly. Instead of becoming afraid, Delta simply laughed and declared that it looked like they would spend the entire day fighting each other. Meanwhile, Shadow and Aurora arrived in a battlefield filled with despair. The royal knights there had all been slaughtered. As they walked through the corpses, they noticed a small crying girl named Aurora. Aurora grabbed Shadow's sword and approached the child as if she intended to kill her. However, the dead knights suddenly transformed into zombies and attacked them instead. Shadow saved Aurora at the last second while the zombies continued swarming them. Since the zombies were infected beings, they had no choice but to fight them. Shadow then asked Aurora why she wanted to kill herself when she was still young. Aurora explained that if Shadow killed her, both of them would be able to escape from that place. Unfortunately, Shadow realized that leaving would not be easy at all. Elsewhere, Epsilon and her team encountered another victim of the cult's experiment. The man was already in terrible condition, so Epsilon freed him before he could completely transform into a possessed monster like she and Alpha were. It was finally revealed that all 7 shadows had once been possessed themselves, but Kajino successfully cured them. Since then, they dedicated themselves to destroying the cult of Diablos so no one else would suffer like they did. Before leaving, they copied every research document they could find so they would not leave empty-handed. Suddenly, the magical interference reached them as well, making it difficult for them to move freely because they were getting closer to the sanctuary's center. Meanwhile, Shadow and Aurora continued slaughtering zombies without mercy. Although they could not use magic properly, their physical strength alone was overwhelming enough to handle the enemy. Eventually, Shadow killed the little girl Aurora wanted to eliminate, allowing them to finally reach the center of the sanctuary. There, they discovered a sword stuck deep into the ground with a giant gate standing behind it. Shadow realized that gate was probably the exit they needed. At the same time, Beta continued massacring the clone army with incredible brutality. Even though her magic was being disrupted, she still managed to overpower the enemy completely. Alpha joined the battle to speed things up, placing the clone master in serious danger. Desperate, the enemy unleashed his full power, but it still was not enough. Beta forcefully activated her magic despite the sanctuary's interference and created an enormous sword. She brought it down on the enemy and crushed him completely like mashed potato. After defeating him, the group returned to their original location. Alpha approached the defeated cult member to extract information from him, but he suddenly ignored her and walked toward Olivia's statue instead. Declaring that he wished to summon the hero Olivia, he activated the ritual successfully. The sudden summoning shocked everyone completely. It was then revealed that the cult of Diablos controlled Olivia herself, allowing them to summon her whenever they wanted. The cult member immediately ordered Olivia to kill everyone present. Just before Olivia could move, Epsilon suddenly appeared and announced that their mission had already been completed successfully. She instructed everyone to leave because the true leader was still inside handling the remaining problems personally. Shadow Garden opened one of the gates and escaped successfully, but they had not actually solved anything yet. The bald priest became completely shocked again, which honestly seemed to be his only role in the story. A moment later, he remembered that 2 people were still trapped inside the sanctuary's center, so he rushed toward them immediately. Meanwhile, Shadow and Aurora were still trying to remove the sword stuck in the ground, but the magical interference made it impossible. While searching for another solution, a magical gate suddenly appeared before them. Out came the bald priest together with Olivia. Without wasting any time, he immediately ordered Olivia to kill Shadow. Shadow drew his sword while Aurora desperately tried stopping him because she believed defeating Olivia was impossible. She begged him to escape, but Shadow calmly asked why he should run away. In the blink of an eye, Olivia attacked and slammed him into the wall before he could even see her movement. She continued attacking relentlessly, yet despite the overwhelming pressure, Shadow simply laughed. The bald priest could not understand why Shadow was laughing while being pushed into such a dangerous situation. Shadow casually explained that laughing was just a bad habit of his. Olivia attacked again and this time stabbed him directly through the heart, but Shadow still refused to die. When everyone demanded an explanation, Shadow calmly replied that battles became boring when nobody talked during them. Aurora interrupted and begged him to stop because she believed he could never defeat Olivia. She volunteered to distract Olivia so Shadow could escape safely. Shadow rejected her help immediately and lowered his defenses completely. Olivia took the opportunity and stabbed him multiple times. The 3 spectators believed Shadow was finally dead. but instead he released a terrifying laugh and declared that he had finally caught her. The moment he grabbed Olivia, completely overwhelmed her. The bald priest became horrified and demanded to know how Shadow was still alive after being stabbed through the heart. Shadow casually explained that he protected his vital organs using magic, so as long as those organs remained unharmed, nothing could kill him. The priest questioned whether Shadow's brain was actually functioning properly, then proudly declared that since Shadow's protection had already failed, it was finally his turn to die. The priest begged Shadow not to kill him, believing that was the response Shadow wanted to hear. However, Shadow replied that such a thing would never happen because they were currently inside the sanctuary's center, meaning the priest could use magic as much as he wanted. Immediately after saying that, the priest summoned 100 copies of Olivia. The sight shocked everyone beyond belief. All the Olivias charged at Shadow simultaneously, but Shadow simply slaughtered more than 10 of them in the blink of an eye. The bald priest completely lost his mind. He could not understand how Shadow was still able to use magic in such a place, especially while maintaining such incredible speed. Normally, magic inside the sanctuary needed to be compressed and refined to avoid being absorbed. Shadow explained that mastering the process took him some time, but he finally achieved what he wanted. The priest refused to accept that any human could possess such an enormous amount of magical energy, and ordered the Olivia copies to kill Shadow immediately. Shadow then remembered Aurora, explaining that removing the sword would allow them to escape. Unfortunately, pulling the sword out properly would take too much time, and Shadow had already grown tired of the game. Shadow unleashed his full power. Even though Olivia stabbed him through the heart again, it was already too late. Shadow declared himself to be the strongest and released a devastating explosion that shook the entire sanctuary and stunned everyone in the kingdom. After the dust settled, Aurora thanked Kajino for everything he had done for her. She apologized because she felt that instead of repaying his kindness, she only caused him trouble. Shadow dismissed her worries completely. Aurora then asked him for one final favor. If they ever met again somewhere else, she wanted him to free her. After saying that, she disappeared. Shadow then continued on his way. Meanwhile, Alexia, Rose, and Beta decided to create an investigation team dedicated to uncovering the truth about the cult of Diablos. They refused to let a tragedy like this happen again because they did not want to lose the people they loved while standing helplessly by. Gathering information would not be difficult for them because Alexia was a princess, Rose was the princess of the Oriana kingdom, and Beta was already becoming extremely famous. Together they officially formed an alliance against both the cult and the heroes controlling the world behind the scenes. The next morning, Epsilon reported to Alpha that they failed to find the sword or the remains inside the sanctuary because Shadow's overwhelming attack completely erased everything. As for the Witch of Calamity Aurora, it was finally revealed that her true identity was actually the demon Diablos himself. Suddenly, everything made sense. That explained why Shadow treated her with such kindness. Alpha then announced that their next mission would take place in the capital city of Midgar. Meanwhile, Gamma took advantage of Shadow's massive explosion by launching a reconstruction project for the destroyed city. Publicly, she claimed it was for the sake of the citizens, but in reality, she wanted to gain control over the kingdom. When Alpha learned about Gamma's plan, she openly praised her intelligence. At the same time, the 7 Shadows gathered together and remembered everything Shadow had done for them. Without him, they would still be suffering as possessed monsters even now. Because of that, they were fully willing to sacrifice their lives for him. Elsewhere, Alexia explained everything she learned about the cult of Diablos to Iris. Despite all the information, Iris revealed that their father still refused to interfere because he did not trust their strength enough. Because of that, Iris decided to participate in the Bushin Festival tournament. To prove her abilities, Iris believed that once she demonstrated her strength publicly, only Shadow Garden would remain as the true mystery. She became obsessed with discovering the source of Shadow Garden's power because she refused to believe normal humans could ever become that strong. In her mind, some kind of magical artifact had to be involved. Alexia tried explaining that Shadow Garden's power was genuine and natural, but Iris refused to listen because she could not accept the truth. Meanwhile, after the recent incident, Rose started doubting her own strength. She continued training while remembering the person who saved her life. During training, she suddenly felt unbearable pain spreading throughout her body, and a strange mark appeared on her skin, making it obvious that something abnormal was happening. Sometime later, countless warriors arrived in the capital to participate in the tournament. Shadow excitedly thought the tournament might become legendary. He considered revealing himself publicly by pretending to be weak before suddenly defeating powerful opponents. knowing that everyone would endlessly praise him afterward. However, another part of him preferred remaining hidden in the shadows instead. Because of that, he visited Gamma and asked her to help him participate in the Bushin Festival without anyone recognizing his real identity. Gamma happily assured him that everything was already under control because they had created a device capable of completely changing a person's appearance. She then told him to choose any body design he wanted so they could turn him into an exact copy. The bodies they used for disguise originally belonged to dead people, so nobody would ever recognize them. Kajino eventually chose a man named Jamina, a former knight who lacked talent. Kajino immediately decided that this identity was perfect for his plans. Only a few seconds later, he completely transformed into Jamina. To make the act more convincing, he bent his back, lowered one arm, and pretended he barely had the strength to move. After arriving in the capital, he headed toward the tournament registration area. A girl immediately stopped him and warned that someone in his condition belonged in a hospital instead of a fighting tournament. Kajino calmly replied that she should never judge a book by its cover. Deep inside, he proudly admitted that his disguise looked so convincing that nobody would ever suspect him. At that moment, a man approached and introduced himself as Quinton. He explained that he had participated in the tournament many times before, and every contestant who looked as miserable as Jamina usually left on a stretcher. Kajino ignored the warning completely, which annoyed Quinton. Quinton then started punching him repeatedly, but from Kajino's perspective, the attacks were so slow that Shadow could have killed him 50,000 times already. A red-haired girl eventually stopped Quinton before things escalated further. She asked Kajino whether he was hurt, but Kajino stood up as if nothing happened. This completely shocked her because he had just been beaten into the ground moments earlier. She introduced herself with the name Feroz, while Kajino casually introduced himself before leaving to complete his tournament registration. At sunset, Kajino met Rose again. Rose explained that her father suddenly summoned her because he wanted her to become engaged. Kajino casually congratulated her, which made Rose ask whether he felt jealous at all. Kajino denied it and explained that compared to a king, he was basically just a nobody. Rose admitted she understood his feelings. She explained that she should have left the kingdom long ago because she already abandoned her claim to the throne in order to dedicate herself completely to swordsmanship. Her goal was to someday reach the same level as the person who once saved her life, meaning Kajino himself. Rose then asked Kajino, "You loving her forever?" Kajino awkwardly replied yes while tossing a hamburger toward her and telling her to relax. The next day, Kajino stood beside his friends while watching the preliminary matches. One of them asked why he was observing the battle so carefully. Kajino explained that he was gathering information on the contestants to decide who to bet on in the next round. Suddenly, a knight appeared behind him and offered to help with the analysis. Kajino jokingly asked whether he was the famous Golden Knight. The man quickly told him not to call him that and instead referred to him as the undefeated one. Kajino immediately left them and transformed into Jimina again because it was finally his turn to fight. The so-called undefeated fighter confidently pointed toward a massive opponent and claimed the giant would obviously win because the difference in body size between the two fighters was overwhelming. However, as expected, his analysis turned out to be completely useless because Jimina instantly defeated the giant the moment the match started. Everyone watching became confused because they did not even see what Jimina actually did. Only Feroz managed to understand that Kajino secretly struck the giant twice directly in the chin. Kajino then continued lecturing the self-proclaimed analyst, explaining that data and appearances could be misleading and that people should never trust looks alone before disappearing from. The following morning, Kajino woke up to shocking Rose had stabbed her fiancé and escaped. The moment Alexia heard the news, she rushed to Rose's house. Everyone began discussing where Rose could have gone. Since the stabbing happened only the previous night, they concluded she probably had not escaped the kingdom yet. They desperately needed to find her quickly because if another noble family discovered her first, they might kill her, potentially triggering a war between kingdoms. Alexia also decided to investigate Rose's fiancé personally because too many suspicious rumors surrounded him. After leaving, Alexia became deeply worried. At the same time, Beta secretly listened to one of the Shadow Garden members reporting information. Beta ordered them to investigate Rose's fiancé completely. Interestingly, Beta already knew Rose's location but deliberately refused to tell Alexia. Rose was currently hiding inside the underground tunnels while escaping from the royal guards. According to the latest reports, she had recently been holding her chest in pain constantly, suggesting something was seriously wrong with her condition. Meanwhile, Shadow attended the tournament together with his friend. Kajino could not decide whether he should interfere with Rose's situation or simply ignore it because he still wanted to remain an unnoticed background character hiding within the shadows. Ironically, people were dying everywhere while Kajino's biggest concern remained protecting his secret identity. As Kajino walked through the city to transform again, he encountered a mysterious woman who immediately recognized Alpha's scent on him. She asked whether he knew someone connected to that scent. Kajino casually admitted that he might know such a person before asking why she wanted to know. The woman explained that she was searching for her niece who supposedly resembled her greatly and was extremely beautiful. Kajino joked that she looked beautiful too, but could not properly see her face because of the strange hat covering. When she removed the hat, Kajino became completely shocked because she looked exactly like Alpha. Kajino laughed awkwardly and claimed he knew nothing. Suddenly, the woman attacked him with incredible speed. Since Kajino did not want to reveal his strength, he intentionally threw himself backward and pretended the attack barely missed him by luck. The woman immediately apologized because she originally believed he was someone powerful. After helping him back to his feet, she sensed something strange about him, but chose not to mention it. She introduced herself as Beatrix before leaving. Kajino then continued onward to assume his Jimina disguise once again. Meanwhile, Feroz and Quentin arrived to watch the next match for the same reason. They wanted to determine whether Jimina truly possessed incredible strength or if he only relied on tricks. This time, Jimina would face the so-called undefeated fighter. Ironically, the man earned that title not because he won every battle, but because he always withdrew whenever he realized he was about to lose. That was why people jokingly called him undefeated. As soon as the fight began, the undefeated fighter charged directly toward Jimina. Kajino effortlessly dodged the attack, but at the same moment, the fighter suddenly felt death itself brush past him. When he looked toward Jimina, Kajino had not even drawn his sword yet. Terrified, the man backed away and accused Jimina of mocking him. He admitted that Kajino could have killed him instantly moments ago and demanded to know why he held back. Kajino gave no answer at all. The fighter then declared that Jimina had already sentenced himself to death before unleashing his full power. The force of his energy shook the entire arena as he launched himself toward Kajino. The undefeated fighter unleashed his strongest attack against Jimina, but the complete opposite happened. The so-called undefeated warrior collapsed onto the ground, defeated while Jimina stood victorious. At that exact moment, Feroz and Quentin desperately tried understanding what just happened. Eventually, they reached only one conclusion: Jimina possessed strength far beyond normal. He effortlessly dodged the first attack with a simple neck movement, but nobody understood how he actually won afterward. They imagined all sorts of possibilities. Maybe he attacked too quickly to be seen. Maybe he blocked the strike with his sword, or maybe he used a hidden magical attack. In the end, the truth was even more ridiculous. Jimina apparently defeated his opponent with nothing more than a sneeze. Quentin immediately called the idea nonsense and insisted it was obviously just luck. However, he confidently declared that Jimina's luck had finally run out because his next opponent would be him. The red-haired girl became so obsessed with understanding Jimina's technique that she started cracking her own neck and pretending to sneeze just like him. But absolutely nothing happened. Embarrassed, she quietly left the area. Meanwhile, Iris sat together with Rose's father, the king of Oriana, and Doem, the fiancé Rose stabbed earlier. Doem explained that they did not need Iris's help and reminded her to invite her father to the tournament finals because both kings were expected to attend. The king then ordered Iris to obey everything Doem requested. Something about the situation felt extremely suspicious to Iris, but she lacked enough evidence to oppose them directly. Meanwhile, the tournament continued and Jimina defeated Quentin as well. At that point, everyone watching finally began suspecting something strange about him. It made no sense that Jimina kept winning every fight without anyone understanding how he did it. However, people quickly convinced themselves that Jimina must simply be using cheap tricks or strange magic. In their minds, it did not matter because Iris would eventually crush him in the finals. While returning afterward, Kajino suddenly found Rose waiting for him. Rose admitted that she judged him unfairly and underestimated him based only on appearances. She explained that the trick he used against the others would not work on her because she already managed to see through all his movement. Kajino simply laughed silently while casually dropping the heavy weights hidden inside his clothes. Even after seeing that, Rose confidently stood before him and copied the same neck movement he used during battle. Kajino walked past her while wondering what exactly she thought she was doing. Meanwhile, Rose herself was hiding deep inside the underground tunnels while fighting royal guards. Even then, she still refused to kill any of them. The following day, the Oriana Kingdom announced a massive reward for anyone who provided information about Rose's location. Shadow secretly admired Rose's bravery, but he also worried about her safety. Just as his sister Krillo nearly reached his apartment, Kajino suddenly heard music playing through the streets. It was Moonlight Sonata, his favorite music piece from his previous life. The moment he heard it being played in this world, Kajino immediately realized only two explanations were possible. Either another person had reincarnated into this world like him, or one of the seven shadows was responsible. Following the music, he eventually discovered Epsilon performing before a large audience. After finishing her performance, everyone showered her with praise. Shadow immediately summoned her and demanded an explanation. Epsilon proudly claimed she learned everything from Zen guidance. Through his influence, she built relationships with important people across the kingdom. She then explained that someone invited her to the Oriana Kingdom, which was famous for art and culture. However, she admitted she had no intention of going there for noble reasons. Her real goal was to take advantage of the kingdom and make it essentially hers. Kajino internally realized he never intended to teach her any of that in the first place. Before leaving, he asked Epsilon whether she knew anything about Princess Rose. Epsilon replied that she only knew Rose was hiding underground in the tunnels. If Shadow truly wanted more information, she suggested asking Beta and Alexia because they were currently investigating the matter. Elsewhere in the tunnels, Beta and Alexia had already pinpointed Rose's exact location. Beta also revealed that Doem was a member of the cult of Diablo. Alexia immediately realized this information would greatly help Iris's investigation because even during her stay in the kingdom, she sensed something suspicious. However, Beta doubted they could save the Oriana Kingdom in time because the king's condition was already terrible. If he died while Rose remained a fugitive, Doem would become the next ruler automatically. Meanwhile, Rose herself struggled badly. She questioned whether the path she chose was truly correct. It was revealed that after returning to her kingdom, she discovered her father in a horrifying condition. Worse still, the kingdom's ministers and knights were suffering the same fate. The person controlling all of them was Doem. That was why Rose stabbed him, but unfortunately he survived. Even if she had managed to kill him, the problem would not have ended because Doem was only one member of the cult of Diablo. The real disasters were still coming. At the same time, Rose's curse kept growing stronger. She eventually concluded that surrendering herself might be the only option left, because if the chase continued any longer, even more royal knights would die. As the curse consumed her further, Rose remembered Kajino and sadly admitted she once dreamed of marrying him and living happily together. Unfortunately, fate clearly had other plans for her life. While drowning in despair, she suddenly heard a piano melody piercing through the darkness. Following the sound, she eventually discovered Shadow. After finishing the performance, Shadow asked her what she truly wanted. Rose confessed that she wanted to protect the entire kingdom, but she felt far too weak to accomplish something so impossible. Shadow responded with incredible confidence and told her that if she needed power, he would gladly give it to her. Rose introduced herself proudly as the princess of the Oriana Kingdom and swore eternal loyalty. Shadow liked her answer and granted her overwhelming power, instantly curing the curse consuming her body. Rose was about to thank him, but Shadow disappeared before she could say anything. Moments later, members of the cult appeared and attacked her. This time, however, Rose effortlessly destroyed them. Declaring that she was no longer weak, she tore them apart completely. As Rose escaped the tunnels, she encountered Alexia and Beta. Alexia became extremely relieved to see her friends still alive, and demanded to know why she caused all this chaos. Rose coldly replied that explanations were pointless because she already made her decision. Alexia tried stopping her, but Rose suddenly used her new power and attacked at full force. Rose easily overpowered her and knocked Alexia unconscious in the blink of an eye. After handing Alexia over to Beta, Rose ordered her not to follow. Beta agreed obediently, while hinting that they would definitely meet again many times in the future. Meanwhile, Kajino returned home and found his sister waiting for him. Krillo immediately grabbed him angrily and scolded him for disappearing, when she specifically told him she was coming to visit. Kajino awkwardly apologized and claimed he had simply been busy. Krillo smugly declared that she was clearly the better sibling because she even managed to obtain a special ticket for him. Krillo gave Kajino a special ticket so he could watch the Bushin Festival tournament. Shadow internally complained that she went through all that trouble just to help him, yet the moment he saw her, he immediately ran away. Even he admitted that was pretty shameless. The next day, Kajino attended the festival. Unfortunately, his seat ended up right beside Iris. The moment he saw her, he immediately tried to leave, but Iris stopped him and forced him to sit beside her after recognizing him as Krilo's brother. Iris apologized for everything Rose put him through, but Kajino casually replied that he was already used to being treated badly by her anyway. He then asked who they believed would win the tournament. Kajino pretended to support Jimina, but everyone immediately laughed at the idea. According to them, Jimina only relied on speed and would definitely lose against Feroz, who was considered extremely powerful. Iris then confidently declared that she herself would become the tournament champion because she was the strongest fighter there. Hearing that made Shadow extremely happy, because it proved his disguise was working perfectly. Nobody suspected Jimina at all. Kajino then excused himself by pretending he needed to use the bathroom. While heading away to transform, he encountered Beatrix for the second time. She accused him of sensing her presence earlier and intentionally ignoring her. Kajino denied everything, but Beatrix insisted she knew he noticed. The two continued talking for a while, although their conversation quickly became awkward and meaningless before they eventually separated. Meanwhile, Doem approached Iris and casually asked how she was doing. Instead of wasting time with small talk, he immediately informed her that the king was feeling slightly unwell, so he came in his place. He also mentioned that despite his condition, the king still planned to attend the tournament the following day. Iris assured him that her own father was already on the way as well. After ending that conversation, Doem suddenly asked who she believed would reach the finals. Iris answered that Feroz had the highest chance after her. However, when Doem brought up Jimina, Iris admitted that he was an extremely mysterious person. She explained that if someone looked carefully into his eyes, they would notice a level of confidence far beyond normal. Doem immediately began praising her insight, claiming she noticed details he completely missed. Eventually, the match between Feroz and Jimina finally began. Feroz decided to defeat him before he could use his speed advantage. She attacked at full power right from the start, but Jimina effortlessly blocked her strikes. She attacked again, believing she finally hit him, only to realize he had already disappeared and reappeared behind her. Feroz turned around in shock, but Jimina vanished again and appeared directly in front of her. He struck her once, then again, before finally smashing her into the ground. Even then, he refused to finish the match immediately. Feroz stood back up and admitted that Jimina's strength was far beyond normal, especially because he had only been using physical abilities the entire fight without relying on magic at all. She accused him of intentionally humiliating her, but Shadow instantly rushed toward her at lightning. Feroz claimed she already predicted every one of his movements. She successfully tracked his position, yet she still could not land a single hit because Kajino finally decided to end the fight seriously. Both Doem and Iris watched in complete shock. They could not understand how someone could possess such overwhelming speed and strength without using magic. Doem then jokingly told Iris that he was beginning to worry about her. Iris coldly replied that he should worry about himself instead, because Jimina had not even revealed his true level yet. After saying that, she walked away. Immediately afterward, Doem ordered his followers to investigate everything about Jimina because he suspected he might secretly belong to Shadow Garden. Unfortunately for him, the cult already had more than enough problems to deal with. At the same time, Iris fought another tournament contestant and completely overwhelmed him. The force of her attacks was so terrifying that the sword in her hand literally began disappearing from the pressure. Meanwhile, Kajino kept thinking about his future match against Iris. His plan was to appear weak at first before suddenly defeating her in the end, so everyone would endlessly praise him for defeating the strongest warrior in the kingdom. While Kajino remained lost in his imagination, Krilo interrupted him and pointed out that he looked unusually happy after the match. Kajino denied it, but Krilo insisted she would cheer him up anyway. Meanwhile, Iris trained with everything she had while remembering her childhood. Ever since she was young, she possessed unbelievable talent, and the entire kingdom placed their hopes on her. Everything in her life had gone perfectly until the appearance of Shadow Garden completely changed the world around her. What angered Iris the most was remembering Alpha's words. Because of that, she became determined to prove to the kingdom that nobody was stronger than her. The next day, Kajino was forced to attend the tournament again because Krilo's match was about to begin. To make matters worse, Iris sat beside him once again. Only a few minutes later, Beatrix also arrived and sat next to them. Beatrix was considered one of the strongest beings alive, because she belonged to the ancient warriors who once helped defeat the demon Diablo. Suddenly, she looked directly at Kajino and asked whether he was Shadow himself. Kajino immediately denied it while pretending to be nothing more than a weak nobody struggling to survive. Everyone around him agreed with that opinion. Deep inside, however, Beatrix could not understand why someone so powerful would intentionally hide his identity and act like a background character instead of the true hero of the story. Meanwhile, Doem secretly fed medicine to the King of Oriana. The drug allowed him to completely control the king's action. Pretending to be sympathetic, Doem claimed he truly pitied the king's terrible condition. However, he blamed everything on Rose because she refused to give him the key he wanted. Since Rose remained stubborn, Doem decided to forcefully take control of her instead. Although he failed to completely dominate her, he believed she would eventually break. If he could not control her, then he planned to kill her the moment she revealed herself. If Rose never appeared, Doem planned something even worse. He intended to manipulate the King of Oriana into murdering the King of Midgar, who happened to be Iris's father. Either way, the result would lead directly to war. However, Doem admitted there was still one major problem standing in their way. They failed to gather any information about Jimina at all, making him the only dangerous unknown factor threatening their plans. Meanwhile, as Jimina entered the arena, he immediately noticed Beatrix watching and became extremely annoyed because she was unbelievably strong. Beatrix's appearance made the situation even worse for Doem because dealing with Iris and Jimina alone was already difficult enough. At that exact moment, the match between Iris and Jimina finally began. Before Iris could even move, she suddenly felt as if her head had been sliced off. In reality, nothing actually happened, but the fear alone overwhelmed her so badly that she collapsed onto the ground trembling. She became convinced that Jimina could kill her instantly, despite standing far away. Trying to calm herself, Iris stood up and drew her sword again. However, the moment she did, her survival instincts warned her that both her arms and legs had already been severed. Even then, she refused to surrender because the audience kept mocking her and asking whether she was really about to lose against a nobody like Jimina. Forced into a corner, Iris unleashed her full power. The pressure from her magical energy shook the entire arena as she rushed directly toward Jimina. However, the moment she looked at him, she realized he was not even holding a sword. The fact that he planted such overwhelming fear into her without using any weapon terrified her. Before she could react properly, Kajino blocked her attack and casually slapped her across the face, sending her crashing to the ground. Jimina was officially declared the winner. At that moment, everyone finally realized the terrifying truth. Iris, the strongest warrior in the kingdom, was completely defeated without even landing a single proper attack. That alone proved Jimina's strength was beyond normal human limits. When Kajino glanced toward Beatrix, he heard her declare that she wanted to fight him personally. Even Doem realized the battle between those two monsters would become disastrous. While Doem desperately searched for a solution, Rose suddenly appeared and interrupted everything. She approached her father and apologized. The king forgave her immediately, but the very next second, Rose killed him herself. Rose later explained that her father would have died either way because Doem already controlled him completely. She chose to kill him herself so Doem could no longer manipulate him. At the same time, Rose intended to take her own life as well. Doem immediately ordered his followers to stop her, but before anyone could move, Jimina intervened and asked whether this was truly the decision she wanted. At that moment, Jimina transformed back into Shadow. Rose instantly recognized him as the same person who saved her when she was younger. Filled with emotion, she swore she would follow Shadow for the rest of her life. Shadow's first command was simple. He ordered everyone to leave the area because he no longer wanted to see anyone there. Doem tried interfering, but Shadow warned him that moving even a single step would result in death. Doem panicked and wondered where all the reinforcements were. But unfortunately for him, Shadow Garden had already eliminated every single one of them. That left only Beatrix. She immediately attacked Shadow, and to Shadow's delight, she was strong enough to entertain him properly. The clash between their swords alone generated enough force to destroy the surrounding area, forcing them to continue the battle somewhere else. The two exchanged attacks endlessly at unbelievable speed. Shadow disappeared in front of Beatrix, then instantly appeared behind her. She blocked the strike, only for him to pass beside her and attack again from another direction. Every time she turned around, he somehow appeared behind her once more. Completely overwhelmed, Beatrix could not understand how Shadow was simultaneously standing before her and behind her at the same time. Shadow simply laughed and told her they had barely even started. Before the battle could continue further, Iris suddenly interfered and declared that the fight would not begin without her involvement. She wielded a sacred sword possessing terrifying power and attacked Shadow immediately. What made the situation truly unbelievable was that Shadow effortlessly avoided Iris's attacks while casually talking to her and fighting Beatrix at the exact same time. Furious, Iris and Beatrix joined forces against him, but even together they could barely do anything. Eventually, they managed to launch Shadow far away from the battlefield, but that result was exactly what he wanted. Landing elsewhere, Shadow casually grabbed a metal pipe and continued mocking them. The battle grew increasingly brutal until they finally reached a train. Shadow warned them not to underestimate the strength of his attacks. Meanwhile, Alpha appeared before Rose and offered her two choices. The first option was death. The second was joining Shadowguard. Rose immediately agreed to join them, but only if they promised to save the Oriana Kingdom. Alpha replied that everything depended on Rose's own value to the organization. Back on the battlefield, Shadow continued playing around with Iris and Beatrix. He casually announced that he would demonstrate a brand new technique he just invented. The technique resembled the abilities of vampires. At that moment, Iris successfully distracted him long enough to attack from behind, but Shadow effortlessly avoided her strike and kicked her directly into the sea. Afterward, he continued fighting Beatrix while praising her for slowly adapting to his fighting style. Shadow explained that although Beatrix excelled at swordsmanship, she still lacked proper control over magical energy. He even offered to teach her personally. Just as he was about to begin the lesson, Iris attacked him again. Shadow then declared that both of them had already lost and no longer deserved it. In response, Iris told Beatrix she planned to unleash her full strength to create an opening. Once that happened, Beatrix would destroy Shadow completely. The two immediately launched their combined attack, but Shadow blocked everything effortlessly. He stopped Beatrix's strike, threw her directly into Iris, and crushed both of them. Even while lying injured, neither woman surrendered. Iris desperately declared that Shadow had nowhere left to escape because the royal guards already surrounded the entire kingdom. Shadow simply laughed and asked why he would ever need to run away or hide from anyone. He then released an overwhelming wave of magical power that engulfed the entire kingdom while laughing with one of the most terrifying laughs in anime history. At that moment, Iris and Beatrix finally understood that they stood absolutely no chance against him. Shadow declared that they were about to witness true absolute power capable of shaking the entire world. He then proclaimed himself to be the Atomic. However, unlike before, he chose not to destroy the city. Instead, he disappeared immediately after the demonstration because the entire scene was simply another performance to show off his power. Iris broke down crying after finally realizing she was completely powerless before Shadow's overwhelming strength. The following day, the kingdom officially announced that Shadow had appeared in the capital and personally destroyed corruption within the city. Ironically, they also declared him the single greatest threat facing humanity. After everything settled down, Alpha officially welcomed Rose into Shadow Garden as a full member. She brought Rose to their hidden headquarters located deep within the Forest of the Beast King, a place filled with terrifying spiritual monsters. Fortunately, Shadow had already eliminated every monster there long ago. When they arrived, the members of Shadow Garden welcomed Rose in their own unique way.